Hi everyone, welcome to the 8th round of the Doeberl 2024 chess tournament. This is Robbie Chess again. I am currently on a 50% score on 3.5 out of 7 with 2 rounds to go. Let's see how I go in this round. This is probably my favourite game of the round, so let's see how I go. So I'm white, I'm playing against Ruicheng Wang, and he's black and he's played the Sicilian defence. And I decided to keep the position closed. You'll see how the position turns out. So this is all opening moves. My knight's pinned, so I got my rook in a good position in the center. I've got my king tucked away. My bishop's hiding back on its original square, but it's nice and defensive here. It protects my king. It does point in this direction. It's not in the best position, but at least it's out of the way of the two knights that are out lurking about trying to, swap potentially knight for bishop. This opening is about going a bit slow and taking time to push in the center, bring your knight out, things like that. So we're really trying to set up a strong pawn center here, and your pieces are sort of hiding behind the center, using it as a shield. I try to take the opportunity my opponent has moved this bishop twice, once there and a second time. So I try to take the opportunity to play a move that sort of gives my king in a safe square and also sort of makes him decide, does he want to swap bishop for knight? Normally in the opening, bishop for knight, you don't necessarily want to swap unless you get some other advantage. For example, the computer sort of thinks I'm up by 0.4 now, so 2 bishops against 1 bishop, even though knights and bishops are equal. It's always a slight advantage for the player with the 2 bishops if it's long-term potential, and it's whether or not you can make it work or not. So my opponent chose to do this because it slows down my plan of playing d4, because then he would just capture. So, and my queen's in a weird spot out here, so I'll have to waste another move, moving my queen back somewhere later, maybe there, or even e3. So he's done it for a gain of tempo, which in the opening is very important. So as you can see, I could only play my pawn up 1 square instead of 2. I would have loved to play it there. Had my queen been on d1, I would have played it all the way up, then defended it by my bishop, and then brought my knight out behind. So at this stage, I can only play it slowly and carefully. So I get my bishop out, castles, bring my queen back because it's on a weird square, being on f3, and I want to eventually push d4. So my opponent strikes in the center with d5. Notice I have wasted a move here, but my opponent has also wasted a move going d6, d5. So this opening is a bit of a slower one, so individual moves and losing a few moves here, it doesn't really matter as much. So I continue my development, and I've sort of misplayed this a little bit. My pieces are a little bit jumbled up behind each other. The bishop's sitting behind the queen. This bishop's blocking my queen and rook from the file. So my pieces are a little bit cluttered. So I feel like I haven't been very accurate. I've done a few mistakes. It doesn't look like I've done anything wrong, but you can see my opponent's pieces. The knights are on good squares, the bishop's on a good square, the queen's ready to move, and the rooks are done. So once he moves the queen, his rooks will be connected, and all of his pieces will be working together. Whereas my pieces are jumbled up amongst each other. So you can see he pushes up, starts an attack on the queen side, tries to attack me while I'm still jumbled up. So I have to play a few accurate moves to try and untangle myself before I can try to claim I've got an advantage having the 2 bishops versus the 1 bishop. You'll notice all the pawns are on the board too, so the advantage of the 2 bishops would be not much at all now, if anything, because it's a very closed position. If you took 3 pawns off each, these 3 pawns for example, if they were all gone, then my bishops would be in a much better position. So my job is to try and open the position up if I can. So I get my bishop out of the way so I can push the pawn up. I decided I want to push the pawn up and bring the knight over and go for a kingside attack. To do so, I have to move my bishop out of the way because it was blocking my queen and rook. So that's the first part of my entanglement. My opponent decides to go d4 and attack in the center before I can do my plan. So I decide to bring my knight out before committing to e5. If I commit to e5 too early, the knight jumps into d5 and he's got pressure on c3. So I didn't want to commit to it straight away. I wanted to prepare the e5 move. And then he plays e5 now, blocking my plan. So I can't play e5, but then he can't ever play knight to d5 because my pawn is on e4. So it's a trade-off. And you'll notice that he's got his pawns on dark squares and his bishops on a dark square. So I didn't mind this. I know I've got 2 pawns on light squares and my bishop's on a light square, so it's kind of even. With both our bishops are blocked in by our own pawns. And he's trying to close the position up because he has 2 knights against 1 knight. So he wants to keep the position closed. You can see how both of us are trying to achieve our plans. I was trying to open the position and he's trying to keep it closed so that his knights are more valuable than my bishops. Because you can look at my bishop now, what's this bishop on f1 doing? It's doing nothing. So good play by my opponent. I decided to capture. Again, I want to open the position. He captured with the knight, and now I took. Now, this is a very important decision point for my opponent. If he were to take with the c pawn, then you'll see the pawns are symmetrical. There's 2 here, and he's got a lot of pawns, and I've got a lot of pawns. So it would have kept the position symmetrical. Now, normally if you're trying to play for a draw, you should keep the position symmetrical as you can and go for the draw. If you want to play for a win, you should try and unbalance the position and capture the other way. I know it's only a slight technicality, but my opponent captures that way. And the computer says this is not the best move. The computer thinks the position is equal and my opponent should play for the draw and play this way and keep the position the same. This way, because the position's even, he doesn't have as much risk. Once you unbalance the position this way, the risk increases. So the reward also increases. For example, my opponent wants to push this pawn up, and then if I were to capture, he would have a passed pawn in the center. So he's going for, that's his strength, but the weakness is I can also push my pawns up and go for a kingside attack. So that's why it's riskier to unbalance the position. Maybe your strength will outweigh my strength, maybe not. At this point, it's probably too hard to tell, but the computer, with all its wisdom, says that I'm up a pawn. It gives me a pawn advantage because this square has been cleared. So I play it slowly. I want to get this bishop into position. This bishop needs to come out to either here or here, g2 or h3. I was thinking g2 as it went on this diagonal. Then when I push e5, I'm threatening the knight and threatening the rook. Also, I don't want to push e5 too early. If I push e5 too early, the knight comes to d5. So I thought if I get the bishop to g2, controlling the d5 square, then when I push e5, the knight can't move anywhere because my bishop will be here, my queen will be here, the knight has to go to an inferior square, not the really good d5 square. So sometimes you got to hold back a bit and prepare a move before you play it. So he played rook there, obviously seeing that my bishop's going to come to g2, and like I said, he wants to push his pawn up. At the moment, he can't do it because I've got queen and bishop. Even though it's doing nothing, it is actually x-raying the square. So he's trying to build up for his push. So I have to be careful. I can't move the bishop too early and let him get this in. If he gets this in and then d3 in, he's really pushing up into my position, and I'm going to get cramped. And then it'll be hard to execute a kingside attack with my pieces stuck defending the passed pawn. So again, I bring my rook over. This rook's doing nothing on a1. I bring it to c1 to stop the advance. So as I said before, I want to do a kingside attack, not too early. Let's try and stop my opponent's plans first, because if he can't push c4, there's not much else he can really do. If I stop his moves, and he just has to move back and forth, then I can proceed with my kingside attack in my own time. So he brings the other rook to the center, which again makes sense. If he wants to push c4, if I take, he wants to be able to push to d3. So having the rooks behind the 2 pawns that will be building up is smart. Computer doesn't like it. Computer thinks he should play more defensive. So my opponent is clearly playing for a win. It is the second last round. Computer thinks he should play rook here to block my advance. For example, I can play e5, knight up. I've got to retreat my bishop because I don't want to swap the bishop off because I have two bishops. And then he can play moves like this. See how this is opposite my queen? Gives him some tactical advantage, and the position here is still pretty even. He's got a lot of pressure on my weak pawn now in the center. I'd have to try and get my queen out of the way, and then it even says that I have to give up a pawn here. So that's why my opponent should have done. He should have played to stop my plan. However, he played here, and because he played there instead of there, the computer assesses this as winning for me, which, I mean, this doesn't look winning unless you're a super genius. But yeah, it says it's winning. That one mistake it's thrown the game. It doesn't look like it's winning. My bishop's still back here. This bishop, it's in a good position, but it's not really doing that much. Everything's well defended. But yeah, can you imagine this is a winning position for white if it's played correctly? I decided to push my pawn up because I wanted to give my bishop some more options. Now that the rook has moved away from that a8 square and onto the c8 square, maybe instead of moving here, maybe it would be better to move to h3. Again, if I move to g2, planning e5, because he's covered this square, the knight can come to d5. So moving the bishop to g2 doesn't really stop his plan anymore. So I played h4, one, with the idea of going for a kingside attack. Two, giving my bishop a square. See how you got to be flexible? And now if I move it to h3, it can actually gain a tempo and hit the rook. So he's overcommitted. Now his queen comes here to stop my bishop coming to h3. He saw it as a threat. There's a lot of arrows on the board. You can see, so now I decided, I was thinking to play, I've got a few moves option. I could play king to h2, preparing bishop to h3, but I was worried about the knight coming into g4 with a check, sending my king back. And then he'd just retreat with the knight. And then we might repeat the position. I was thinking here that I might start playing for a win. I didn't know it was winning because the computer told me it is, but I didn't know at the time on the board. I was like, I don't think I'm winning, but I feel like I've got a good potential with my queen and rook lined up to push this pawn up and go for a kingside attack, and I wanted to play on. So I decided not to go for the king move. I decided to swap off bishop for knight. The knight is a good defender of the king, and I know I had the bishop advantage, two bishop advantage, and I've just given away my two bishop advantage. But what I've got now is I've got a light squared bishop versus a dark squared bishop. So I've changed the nature of the position. The computer says it's no longer winning. I'm only up by less than a pawn, so I gave away most of my advantage. So in hindsight, that was not a good move. But my idea was get rid of the defender of the king. King comes up, bishop comes up, I take over the light squares. With the queen coming up and maybe the bishop coming to f5, it really sets me up for a good kingside attack. And because the bishops are on opposite colors, if my bishop attacks a light square, his bishop can't defend the light square. So it sort of unbalances it and makes it good for attacking. His bishop on the dark squares is blocked by its own pawns, whereas my bishop can come around the outside of my own pawns. And if I can get it up around the outside somehow to get it to d5, or on this diagonal, anywhere on this diagonal would be ideal, then this bishop would become extremely strong. It would be attacking a light pawn. He can't defend it with a piece. He can only defend it with a rook, a queen, or a king. And so when I build up pressure on that pawn, eventually I've got an extra piece in him. So I know this is all abstract and you can't calculate move by move, but in general principles, that's why I swap the pieces off, to give myself attacking chances. And also it stops him actually pushing the pawn. It makes it harder because he hasn't got a light squared piece or a knight, say a knight on e5, to help. This dark squared bishop is kind of not a very good piece right now. Even if he managed to try and get it around to a good square, there's really no good squares. If he got it to there, maybe it would be doing something, maybe threatening my rook, but my rook can just move. But he hasn't got any really good squares compared to my d5 square, which is defended by a pawn. He hasn't got a good square for this bishop right now. In fact, it becomes a target. So now king h2, threatening to win an exchange, because that skewers the queen and the rook. Computer thinks it's holdable, but Rook c6. Okay, he moved his rook to a light square. See, this is one of the things, in general, it's probably better to move it to a dark square so it can't be attacked. This light square, it's always a problem. So you watch, I bring my bishop out, consistent. I didn't want to move my pawn yet. I wanted to get my bishop developed. Finally, this bishop that's been sitting on f1 the whole game doing nothing, finally, look at it now. Look at it, it's got a nice range into the queen side, and it could potentially come to f5 and then switch to attack the king side if the timing is right. He's always got g6, so I have to make sure the timing's right. So he moves the queen, e5. Now I decided to go e5, e6. That was my plan. So if he moves the bishop, then I would probably go e6, and then, for example, if he captures, you can see my idea. The bishop gets to this diagonal. I can even move it away like this, and this bishop is in an extremely good position attacking the king. It's also preventing the c4 move, so that's why this diagonal is so important. It does multitasking. I've now opened an attack on his bishop, so for example the bishop moves, and I thought this position would be a strong position for me because my king's well defended. I've got 3 pawns in front of my king, my opponent has 2. I control the only open file. For example, this is like literally winning. It's going to be checkmate now. So you can see how quickly one mistake, so he'd have to defend the bishop. But then he's walked into a pin, and move like this, for example, would just win the bishop. So you can see how quickly the game can turn once it opens up. So what happened was I played e5 and he played rook to e8, pinning. He didn't want to move the bishop because he saw that if I get the e6 move in and the position opens up, this bishop becomes an insanely strong attacker all of a sudden when it was sitting here a few moves ago doing nothing. So you can see my thought process in getting my pieces out. It took time, but I got there. I played f4, just defending my pawn because he had to attack twice and building up a strong pawn chain on the king side here. You can see my king is very well defended. The queen is opposite my king, but I've got 3 pawns in the way. And you can see how these 4 pawns here really restrict this bishop, but at the same time allow my bishop to flick back and forth along the light squares. So say for example it goes to g2, threaten the rook moves, comes to e4, nice and defended, threatens the king side. My bishop is very mobile. I can flick around attacking the queen side and then the king side. If it gets to e4, it's attacking the queen side and the king side simultaneously in conjunction with queen h5. You can see how all of a sudden a nasty attack can develop. I can go h5 as well, queen g4. Like I've got all these attacking moves. Bring my king back behind my thing and bring my rook over. I know I'm just drawing green everywhere, but you can see how a bunch of moves could come, quite realistically could happen, and all of a sudden his king would be overwhelmed. My opponent played g6, again losing move. I'm up 2.7 now, so nearly a whole piece. Looks like a smart move. He wants to bring the bishop back to defend his king. He wants to have his pawns on light squares to restrict my bishop, how my pawns are restricting his bishop. But it's actually a losing move. And I played, you'll see why. So at this point I calculated, I win a pawn now. This is why it's a losing move. He didn't have time for that. What he should have played was c4. Now that my bishop's not guarding this diagonal, this was his chance to play c4 and to get away with it. I do have moves like queen up threatening the pawn, and also he can't defend the pawn because then I get his bishop, so I would win this center pawn. If he tries to like defend back this way, so he's got like this to cover it, he loses a rook. So he can't actually defend this pawn, this bishop, rook, everything's done. So this would win a pawn, but the computer says that was his last chance to try and hold the draw. g6 loses a pawn as well, but it loses it in a much worse position because you'll see the next move. So this is a combination that I worked out when he played g6. I played bishop to g2, threatening the rook, and just keep an eye on this rook opposite this queen, right? So I'm threatening his rook. Where does he go? Well, he can only go there or there. His queen blocks his rook's retreat. He's got 2 squares to go to. He chooses b6. Either one, it's the same position. Now b4. You'll notice there's a pin. This pawn can't be taken, and because of my bishop on this diagonal, because of this bishop on this diagonal, his rook can't defend. The other rook can't defend either, because then this bishop would be taken. So he's got too many pieces under attack at once. So he loses a pawn. So he decides to defend his bishop, and it looks like it defends the pawn. However, I can take the pawn. So now I won a pawn. The problem is if he tries to take, what move he made was he moved the rook back. But if he tries to take the pawn, I've got to move like queen here, threatening the bishop. Bishop can't move because he loses the queen. Can't defend this way because of the bishop. There's no pawns that can defend it. So he's going to lose the bishop. The only way to defend it would be rook c8, but then I switch my bishop back to h3, threatening the rook. If the rook moves, I win the bishop. If the bishop can't move, because then I'll win a whole rook. So you can see this bishop keeps changing from this diagonal to this diagonal, and it just creates chaos. His pawns have advanced so far that they've left holes for this bishop to come in and attack from the rear. So he would lose a piece. So he saw that and he didn't take it, but now I've threatened his rook, so his rook moved back. So now I'm up a pawn. Now he would be threatening to take the pawn because he can try and defend. So I played rook to c2 so that if he took, I could double up and win the bishop again. So I'm keeping my extra pawn. With the rook on here, I've always got the threat, so I don't need to double up just yet. I decided to place my bishop on the diagonal that I said I wanted it on. This diagonal was always key for me, and look how it attacks this pawn now. He decided to just push his pawn. I swapped it off, and then I decided to double defend my c pawn. Now, this is something I need to get better at. This is plus 3.8, and this move goes 2.6. So this move gives up like a pawn worth of advantage. Even though it's still winning, it's getting closer to maybe he could hold. I need to get better at working out how to go for the kill. The best move in this position, you can see the white arrow, is actually f5. The computer wants me to go for a kingside attack, utilizing the fact I've got a good bishop on a good square. It wants me to go for a pawn storm in the center, utilizing my queen and rook. It doesn't actually care about this pawn too much. It says his pieces are offside. He has a black square bishop which can't defend. Now's the time to just go for the attack. For example, rook threatening my bishop. Bishop can come back to this, stay on this diagonal and defended by like everything. And then it just wants me to bring my queen up. Threatening queen takes there. f7. King goes over. This is the best move. He has to give up the pawn. And it just wants me to go for an attack. And I've won another pawn. I'm up 2 pawns. He can have this pawn if he wants. But this bishop, you can see, it's just a deadly piece. I've got too many threats going on. I can always play this pawn up here to cement my bishop in a good square. My queen now defends. You know, I can't push the pawn, but yeah, this is just a dominating position. I decided to go on queen side, so give up some advantage. And I played my queen up. I was playing a bit slow. I wanted to play my queen up and then my pawns up. I wanted to get every piece on its perfect square before attacking. And in the end, it worked out for me. So I pushed my c pawn. I want to get it as far as I can. I decided I want to get it as far as I can to distract his pieces over here. You'll notice his pieces are all on the queen side. Mine are, my 2 rooks are, but these bishop and queen are sort of attacking both ways. That's why the center in chess is very important. You can see that I control the center well and truly, so I can attack both sides at once. I decided to play h5, thinking he wouldn't take. Thinking like, well, if he takes, it ruins his pawns. And then I was thinking next move I'll play h6. Or, for example, now I'm threatening to go take. Hang on, let's get rid of all these arrows. I'll make it a bit cleaner. Let's show you my plan. Ooh. So, my threat is to go h takes g. He can't take back with the f pawn because it's pinned. H takes g, queen takes. Again, pinned. Winning a pawn and then winning a second pawn, or checkmating. So my threat with h5 is I'm going to take. So in hindsight, he doesn't really have another move besides. He could move the king over, but I would still open up the position. King comes across, rook comes across, and I'm coming down. So he takes. And then for a second, I'm looking at the position going, oh, I think I miscalculated, because he can take that and get away with it. He's threatening to play queen into g4, defended by the pawn, which creates like trouble for my king. If his queen gets to a good square, if I move too far away, like say he could bring the rook down and swap pieces, and then the queen the queen can come in down here, threatening my rook. The other rook jumps down. All of a sudden, there's threats against my king. So I didn't like him getting his queen to g4. So at this moment, I'm winning. It's plus 5.8, but I sort of panicked a bit. I was like, oh my god, he's going to get his queen out. So I'm not very good when I'm in a winning position. When I'm winning, I sort of get a bit nervous. So I felt like I was definitely ahead and definitely had a chance to win. But yeah, nerves. It's a funny thing. It was the second last round. So I was calculating it through, and I decided to push the pawn one more square, which is correct. I correctly calculated he'd want to keep his rook on the... Well, he's only got two moves, there or there, so that's fine. He can't go to either of those two squares. So it brings the rook up. But this is funny, you start hallucinating, because now I'm thinking the rook's going to come over, the queen's going to come over. All of a sudden, what have I done? I've opened myself up for an attack. So I was thinking, what do I do? My plan was probably to go f5, something like f5, with the eventual idea of going f6, and creating sort of his king, a trap for his king. I didn't necessarily like that, because I thought, he could bring the bishop out, threatening my rook. My rook has to move, say I move to an aggressive square like here. All of a sudden his rook comes down. Now I can't move my rook because it's pinned to my king, so I'd have to try and defend. And then I was looking at moves like take, and then a move like, for example, moving down to a3 with the threat of bringing the second rook down. And then if these rooks get swapped, all of a sudden he's got a passed pawn. If I move my rook away, I can't move it. Well, I can move it towards my king or something. Then he takes this pawn. So all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is probably not as good as I thought. In fact, I think it's still winning, but so I went for a different kind of move. I decided, look, I've got to be winning here. This is second last round. I'm in such a strong position. I've got a really strong pawn here. I feel like I didn't calculate this when I played h5, but an idea sprung into my head. I thought, you know what? Don't worry about playing f5. I didn't like the continuation. I've got to play really aggressive here, because if he gets one more move in, these rooks counteract my rooks, and I've only got a queen and a bishop, and it sort of stuffs up my attack. I need rooks for the attack. So I decided to give up a piece, taking the pawn. Now my opponent played king g7. My idea was, if he takes the bishop, and again, I didn't calculate this out. I'm like, this has got to be winning. Like, queen takes pawn. Now, where's his king going to go? His king can come up to the center. If it does come, now my rook comes into the attack. Notice he doesn't have time to play rook b2. If he had one more move, he could have pinned it to my king, but he doesn't have the time. Let's say he swaps rooks because he's trying to fend off the attack. And then where's his king go? These squares are covered. He's got two options. If he goes there to d5, you've got a checkmate on the board, in the middle of the board. If he goes to the other square, well, I've got queen f5 check. Notice how his queen is now skewered. So he can take my rook, but I get his queen. And then shortly after, I'll get another queen. I'll move my queen out of the way and get another queen, or I'll check. Next, I'm even threatening check. For example, say he tries to get a queen, check. If he doesn't take the pawn, I get a queen. If he takes the pawn, check, and then followed by taking that, followed by taking that. So it's a winning position. So you can see how he can't take the pawn. So luckily I saw that move. My opponent played king g7. Now, I played a silly move. When I think about this afterwards, all I have to do is threaten the c8 square with something, with anything. If I threaten the c8 square, even with my queen, as long as I'm threatening it and not allowing the queen to take, if the queen has to move anywhere, queen, I get another queen. So all I have to do is either figure out how to get this bishop to this diagonal or this queen to this diagonal. You can see there's a few squares it could go, or for example, he could try and sneak in, and he has got a lot of squares covered, luckily for him. But if I think about it now, all I have to do is go basically queen g2. For example, say I went queen g2. That's all I have to do. Threatening the simple queen h3. He swaps queens, and there's no way for him to defend. His rooks can't get back in time. It's an easy win. He can have my bishop. I mean, I sacrificed the last move. So what's the difference? Queen h3, and it's over. He can't bring a rook back to defend. He just loses the rook. So that's probably the best he can go for, where I just take the rook. But you can see with my queen, coming in, I don't know exactly, probably I'd check first. Check first, drive him to a worse square, something like this. Rook comes up, threatening, he gets a check in. I've got to be careful, I can move probably even up a square, even up to here. It's pretty safe. Threatening to take the bishop, threatening check if he defends it, take the bishop. My other rook can come in if he moves up. So that's all I had to do. That's all I had to do. But in the moment, I'm going to win, you start panicking a bit. And I played bishop takes h5, thinking I'll win a pawn, and then I'll go f5, f6. Again, it is winning. But why subject myself to this kind of a move? My bishop is now pinned to my king. Like, why take the risk? And then I played another silly move, which is also winning, but I played g4, thinking, this is what I calculated. Bishop takes h5, rook h6, g4. I'm all good. And I thought, next move, f5, f6, whoops. Oh my God, f5, f6, winning another piece. So it's simple, say, just put on the board, f6, check, wins another piece, and like once that's open, I can even afford to, look at this, his king's completely exposed. It's just a matter of time before it's, looking at checkmates, for example, down there. What would I do? Probably something like that. Check, and he's trapped. So again, obviously computer says I'm still winning, but I panicked. When I was here, I realized after I played g4, I sat here and went, oh my God, you know what he can play? He can play queen takes g4. The bishop doesn't defend the pawn. And next move, he's threatening checkmate. So I sat here, and as soon as I played g4, I saw queen takes g4. And I was panicking. I was like, oh my God, what do I do now? He's literally threatening checkmate. I've got no checks. My rook can't defend my bishop. My queen can't defend my bishop. I actually lost. I threw the game away. I was panicking, thinking I threw the game away. I've got nothing now. And I was trying to calculate, oh yeah, I can play a rook over here, pinning his queen to his king. Checkmate. Still checkmate. And I was like, I was actually stressing out. My heart was racing, and I was like, it's like what am I going to do? My opponent played a3. And then I was like, all right, I can see the win now. f5, don't let his queen come in. I'm winning again. Thank God he missed it. After the game, I said to my opponent, you missed queen takes g4. And he goes, I can't play queen takes g4 because you obviously just play rook g2. And And I was like, yeah, but you can take that with checkmate. But I missed that my king can now come back behind my rook. I forgot about the shield of my rook. So now I win his queen. So now I'm winning. He saw this line, he saw this position, and he said, oh no, I can't do anything because if you take, I'm down a queen, so I lose, and I'm about to queen next. So he said I'm lost. But in the moment, I didn't actually see that I could have played rook g2. I was actually calculating after this. I was like, my only move I can do is queen f5. I missed rook g2. I mean, I might have found it with a bit more time, but this is when I was thinking on his clock. So if he'd actually played queen g4, I might have eventually found rook g2. But before he played it, I was panicking, going, oh my god, the only way I can get out of it is queen f5 to defend this. I need that critical move, and then he takes the pawn, and then I can go. That gets his queen off, I guess, off this g file, and then I can either maybe check first. It's better, which gets his king to the back rank. If his king goes to the back rank, notice these squares are all covered. If his king goes to the back rank, I queen with check. So king goes back, queen with check, swap queens, and then I actually win because his king's actually on the back rank. So that's what I was thinking, but he actually has a better move. He can just block with the rook here, and even though I take, he can just go back and try and. Oh no, he can't actually. Yeah, actually, technically, this is probably still winning. Oh no, he's got check here. That's right. I think it's a draw because I think he's got this counter check. I'm about to queen. If he moves his queen to a large square, I've got this discovered check and everything. So it's close for me winning, but this check here saves him. If I go king to h3, he goes queen h4 checkmate. Bishop's finally useful. If I go to the back rank, he can take that rook with check and then take the pawn. So it's winning. So I have to go rook to g3. Now if he takes the rook, again, looks like he's winning. I've got check. King goes over, queens, which he doesn't have. I mean, he's got check down here. It gets complicated. Imagine trying to calculate this with not much time. But again, it's like a rook. It's a rook and bishop versus rook and bishop. I've got 2 pawns. He's got 3. Both our kings are exposed. I feel like I could hold the draw here. This pawn's hanging. These 2 pawns are weak. I can bring a queen in check. So say he swaps queens, swaps that off. Even if he tries to go there, I'm sure luckily for me, I've got this sneaky move, which when he plays a2 check and wins the pawn. Otherwise, next move I go there, stopping that pawn. That pawn's blocked. This pawn can't be attacked. If I want to, I can move it. My king can stop that pawn. Draw, thank God, I didn't lose. But I would have thrown away my advantage. So yeah, things happen funny over a chessboard. Back to the game. This is what actually happened. So once f5 happened, I breathed a complete sigh of relief and went, all right, I'm good now. Now my queen defends my pawn. Everything's defended now. Everything's defended, easy win. All I have to do is come up, push up. I've got a very simple plan now. The pressure is off. Bishop g5. I just played queen up, ignoring my rook. You can see moves like check, moves like queen to d8 if he takes. Again, all I have to do is attack this square. And after this queen d5 move, my opponent resigned. So, for example, this is my plan. So bishop takes c1, check. You'll notice, again, his king's caught in the net. Where does he go? If he goes back to f8, which looks like a good move, I've just got check. You'll notice my bishop and my pawn block him off. So it's just check. He has to take, checkmate. He's got nothing now. So that was, if he goes to the back row, again, he's blocked, check, and it's checkmate, back rank checkmate. So, I won that game. It's my second win of the tournament. I didn't get many wins, so I was so happy to have a second win, especially so late in the tournament. And I'm actually on more than a plus score. I'm on 4.5 out of 8, so I'm up by half a point over the plus score with a round to go. Hope you guys enjoyed this game. It was a bit of a longer one, but it was getting pretty complex towards the end. Let me know if you need me to explain any more variations or you want me to go over any more detail. All right, 4.5 out of 8. Let's see how I go. 1 round to go. Hope you guys come in for the next game.